One of the most remarkable things about sandwiches is how widespread they are. The sandwich has been invented in some form by dozens of intelligent species. The Arcanians use the natural silk that they produce, line it into strips, pound it with their foreleg, and then lay their food over top, after which they lay another silk layer over the food. Of course, this keeps the live meal from escaping, whereas human sandwiches do not consist of living things. But the principle is the same. Where the human sandwich stands out is in the sheer variety of foods that this omnivorous species is able to consume. It's a telling thing about the Homo sapiens species. That food is their single greatest drive. They will die if they go without water for a relatively short period of time, hence why their civilizations began around sources of water. But it is food that drives their mobility more than anything else. The typical intelligent species has roughly 12 to 20 forms of food that they can ingest for nutrients, and it has long been theorized in Gelkmaze's theory of evolution by nutritional minimalism that it is this minimalist drive for consumption enabled intelligent life to advance to a civilized level. Less time spent consuming or searching for food meant more time to work on creative projects. But humanity overturns this theory completely, as they will eat almost anything. Hence the theory I present. Bailey's theory of dietary intelligence is that this highly omnivorous predatory species developed its creativity not just by way of its high socialization, but in order to ensure its dietary needs could be met. They can kill anything, and anything they can kill, they can consume, which presents new opportunities for survival. And to that theory, I credit the sandwich given to me by Fauve. It contained 5 different types of meat from 4 different animals: bacon, roast beef, ham, chicken, turkey, and 2 different types of cheese with a very thick bun. It was this dietary experience that was also behind my transmission, suggesting that more work should be done on expanding dietary ranges for my own species, as the more complex diet of human foods worked wonders on my health. Strange, perhaps, but it was long theorized even by humans that life evolved elsewhere and was seeded on Earth in a bacterial state by way of an asteroid. It is conceivable that our compatibility is related to our common origins. To that end, I suggest extensive genetic testing to determine if there is any truth behind this. If it is so, and I am right, then humans, Dlamacens, Arcanians, our evolutionary tree makes us all one family of endless cousins. After eating my sandwich, I was still hungry, and eyed the refrigerator where the chilled meat was stored. Humans dislike rotted meat. They have strangely delicate digestive systems. They can handle almost no parasites or rot, though they are known to eat certain cheeses with maggots. The truth is that despite their broad diet, they are very susceptible to bad food, and spoilage in human terms is much earlier than, say, spoilage in Arcanian terms. I was never able to properly grasp just why their ability to consume so many kinds of food was so wide, but the window in which it was viable to do so was so small. At most, all I can say is that their ability to consume many things compensates for the shorter window in which to do so. At that moment, though, all I wanted was another sandwich. My jaw opened, and I'm not ashamed to say that I was panting. I turned on the kitchen sink and dipped my head in to begin lapping up the water. Humans are clever about their plumbing solutions, and as such, they maintain a steady flow of water at all times that they can activate at will. As such, I had clean, filtered water with no parasites or filth. In an instant, they even allowed for the setting of temperature, thus letting me have it exactly as I wished. The crisp, cool water was a great relief to me after what I'd just eaten, though I kept my eye on their meat storage box, the colloquially termed fridge. Keep in mind that, of course, I am always working while on this task, so I made special note of all my surroundings. The kitchen and dining area was united in one broad room, and there were a number of conveniences laid out to make it more pleasant. A viewing screen with a gaming console, a clock combined with a radio. They had a machine for cleaning dishes, the cold box where they kept meat, a motorized can release device, a can opener. Humans are the masters of recombination. They will turn any 2 items into something to kill with, play with, or work with. And I mean anything. But I will explain how this pertains to their mating games later, and the 34th rule that all humanity follows. For now, it is enough to understand that I was hungry. I hadn't asked Fauve for permission to make another, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. Guests who wake their hosts are considered to be very rude. Humans prize their skills as hosts very highly, and a good host will go out of their way to provide for all the comforts of their guest, Some human cultures will give to the guest anything the guest merely admires, even if it is the only luxury the host possesses. Others will share a tent, even with a hated enemy if the storm is bad. They will risk their lives for their guests, merely because the guest is in fact a guest. It is sacred to them to treat those far from home as they would wish to be treated when they travel in turn, and not much is more loathed than someone who abuses that guest trust. However, a guest too has obligations to treat their host with respect, to honor their possessions. Disrespecting the boundaries of the host are liable to see you ejected. Sexual congress with a spouse, theft, overconsumption, or demands for money, goods, or services are beyond the pale of rudeness. A guest may hint at their wish, or if it is something necessary, such as food, water, orifice waste disposal, they may ask directly. But beyond that, humans expect to be allowed to offer things to their guest, and feel put upon if the guest demands it, even if the host were willing to give it anyway. This put me in an uncomfortable position. I was hungry, but waking my host to ask for food seemed rude, even if they had implied I could simply take what I wanted. So, utterly at a loss and unable to sleep, I poured a cup of coffee and sat at their table to wait. The house in which they lived had multiple windows, and around the time when the sun began to rise enough for its light to touch me at the table, I finally heard a door open. I swung my head around and wagged my tail back and forth, and saw Rebecca enter the room. "May I please have a sandwich?" I asked. I really hated asking, and it was hard for me to look up at her face, though I did notice she was rubbing her eyes. She looked at me, mute at first, still rubbing her eyes, and asked, "For breakfast? I guess, if you want. But I was about to make some bacon and eggs. Would you like both? And how long have you just been sitting here in the dark? If you're hungry, just eat. Our home is your home for the next 50 years, so please, don't just sit there, rumbling, for hours." She laughed a little when my jaw opened wider. Both of my stomachs were growling in sync, and I had stressed out so much that I hadn't heard them. Leave it to a human to make a joke out of worries and anxiety, and then combine it with a little generosity to make everything better. The human ability to deal with stress is so very unique in the galaxy that I would be negligent not to cover it. I couldn't help but think about it when watching Rebecca work. Her feet seemed to dance over the floor with light, airy steps. She was what you might call a morning person. While it is true most humans are not nocturnal, the variability of Homo sapiens is such that their rhythms are unpredictable from person to person until you know them, and even that might change with time as they get older. But no matter their rhythms, their ability to normalize the abnormal has made them the hardiest of species that I know of. A Dlamisa like myself will start losing fur in a relatively short period of time. We shake and tremble. We pant and flee if stress goes on too long. But a human's response to stress, while similar to ours at first, simply normalizes it. See Figure 8-7 to see the human female in her dress and cosmetics walking casually past a gun-wielding soldier in an ancient clash in a place called Northern Ireland. She neither winces, hides, or displays any fear characteristics. The fighting between the two groups was routine, and she was set on getting to where she was going. Can you name any race that would walk through a battlefield in a war? To shop? I lived among one such race, humanity. This propensity to normalize horror is also one of the reasons why they are sometimes perceived to have an absurdly high tolerance for risk and are seen to engage in so many reckless behaviors. But with that, they also had a way of easing stress. Rebecca's light and airy motions, the way she moved from task to task, humming a little tune while she opened the cooling box and to bring out meat and put together another meal for me, was as effortless and graceful as a dancer. If giving me something to eat was any bother at all, she gave no sign of it. And while she worked, she talked. Humans like to do that, I'm sure you noticed. "What's your home like?" she asked. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Do you have family there? Will they send video relays? What kind of things did you do there?" She peppered me with so many questions, but I want to call your attention to this. All her questions were about me, about my life and my home. Humans have an expression that they sometimes use ironically, and sometimes not, and that is, "You are always the most interesting subject to yourself." They also refer to it as main character syndrome, wherein a person believes themselves to be everybody's focus. Therefore, it is fairly common for the more selfish and self-interested humans to only talk about themselves, their work, their projects, their lives. But when a human cares about you, or wants to make you comfortable. They want to know you, and they don't make it about themselves. Rebecca asked about me because she was showing care and concern for me. My hunger distress affected her, and she, this woman from another race who I had never met at all before one day ago, cared enough about me to try to comfort me by asking things she thought would make me happy, while also giving me food from her own home and calling it mine. Imagine if all the galaxy's races treated each other as I was treated in that one kitchen with a near-total stranger. What could we be? What could we do? What improvement in our way of life would we find if every stranger was treated like that? It was happening faster than I knew. That is, understanding what my professor meant in a profoundly personal way. My tail wagged and spirits picked up, and when she set the sandwich and its plate in front of me, she didn't sit right away. Instead, she went to the pot and said, "Oh, I guess Fauve already made some. Would you like a cup, Bailey?" She asked me while reaching up into the cabinet to grab one for herself. "Yes, please," I said, using my very best manners. "Coming right up," she said while pouring one of her own. Such a good girl, very considerate. There was a note of pride in her voice and a little smile I could see just barely peeking out from the side of her face, and that was when I realized something else. Fauve had deliberately made something she knew she wouldn't likely get to enjoy for herself. They were all coffee drinkers, except for little Michael. I cannot emphasize enough how significant this is. It was the spirit of generosity defined, doing something that will benefit someone else, even if it will not also benefit you. Without even thinking about it, as near as I could see, Fauve had made something for her family just because she'd been awake and there to do it, even though she would be back asleep and the pot would be drained. Perhaps she relied on someone else making another pot, but this reciprocity between family members and unthinking, casual generosity defined the human family with whom I stayed. A moment later, Rebecca placed a cup for me beside the plate on which I now had only crumbs. I had wolfed down my sandwich in a few bites and was licking the plate clean to savor every nutrient. And the questions began again. "Are you comfortable in your room? What would you like to start with today? Do you have any questions for me before the others get up?" Again, my host made me her focus. I had seen servant classes in other species, but I had never seen those who are not servants take it as a principle that they should act as such. I must levy caution to anyone who travels to Earth: never mistake your host's acts of service toward you to be subordination. They are not your servants. They act well toward you to smooth bonding and become comrades, friends, and display their dignity and self-respect, to give as they would wish to be given to. If you abuse their kindness, you will find yourself without their company. For the moment, though, I was simply deeply moved by her concern for my well-being and my previously obvious stress, and without thinking, I lowered my head toward her. In Dlamisa culture, this is a sign of submission or gratitude, but the human took it very differently. Her hand went up and rested on my head between my ears, and she began to rub and scratch, and each of my hearts skipped their beats with the warmth of her touch. I didn't ask her to remove her hand. If anything, I leaned into it all the more, and while my stress-turned contentedness now began to turn into happiness, I explained what I wanted to see on my first full day on Earth. I wanted to see something called an amusement park. And that is a story that would lead to events I never even dreamed possible, even in my wildest nightmares, or in a deep dark well filled with all my deepest fears.